Hey everybody! Welcome to Friday the 13th, the series. I'm your producer, Robert.
And I'm your guest, Jeremiah.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of Jeremiah's Syndication Spectacular and Variety Show Extravaganza. In this very special episode of Friday the 13th, the series, Jeremiah and I will reveal how Friday's success led to its downfall. Then, after a little preamble, Mr. J will relate a heartbreaking tale in which Brad Pitt put a sidearm in his hand and forced him to shoot a German sitcom in the back. Was it your favorite show whose neck he had to gently push down onto the chopping block before swinging the axe? Stick around to find out as we discuss that and so much more. If this is your first episode with us, and I can't persuade you to start literally anywhere else, good luck, and remember, you were warned.
The audiences that would write letters and complain and call in and say, what about the children?
We call these daylight people.
Yeah, please somebody think of the children.
Not creatures of the night, these people.
Probably weren't noticing this show about the devil at midnight, but when it started airing at 5 in the afternoon on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Oh, that's prime letter writing time.
You're not backed by the network. There's no national commitment to air your show. Your contracts are with local TV stations, which, as you can imagine, in the Bible Belt, in many cases, those local stations might be run by the people that are a big part of the church community in that town. In even non-Bible Belt towns, those station managers and programming managers and station owners,
they have kids in school and other parents know them.
Getting a few letters from the local churches, from the local PTAs, from people saying, I'm going to boycott your station. You're in a town of 50,000 people and you get a few hundred letters from the church or from the PTA or from whoever saying, I can't believe you're broadcasting the show. That's going to have an impact on you. And you might reevaluate whether or not it's worth it to keep the show on your local channel. And these shows that are in syndication, they don't have big contracts with one network. They have dozens and dozens and dozens of tiny contracts with all these little small stations located all across the country.
Now, that's what I was going to ask about an hour and a half ago. Would it be worse to get notes from just one network versus 160 affiliates? And I'm guessing it's the latter, because if even some of them start giving you problems, you probably kind of need all of them.
You're really not going to get notes from the local stations. The notes are going to be, I want to void this contract, or I'm not going to renew it.
That's the kind of note I'm talking about. We're not going to show this show. Not rewrite Jack's line on page 25.
If you were part of NBC, you would get notes from NBC of change this, fix this, I don't like this language here, I don't like the scene here. There's too much near nudity in this, there's too much overt sexuality in this. Was this person implied to be 80s gay? We don't like that.
Oh, and by the way, your stars are cousins.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
You would get these notes. And they would have a lot of sway to get you to make those changes. Local broadcasters, they don't really have that sway. And they're not really going to give you a lot of detailed notes, if any. But
they can not renew you.
And there might be an easy out on the contract. As they got successful, they started to bump up against that risk. Because when they were hidden in the shadows of late night hours, no one was really questioning what they were doing.
You're under the blanket with a flashlight. Could be reading Playboy or the Bible.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how you said you watched it after Saturday Night Live, and then over time you started following it as it started airing earlier and earlier in Missouri.
Yes. It started to move into Saturday afternoon. One other thing with syndication is sometimes you could actually be in the same marketplace on two different stations. It definitely jumped around on the dial in terms of what channel it was on. I want to say there might have even been times when it would be on two different stations at two drastically different times.
I don't think I ever encountered that growing up.
Especially big hits like Oprah. She would be in such demand, even if you couldn't get an exclusive deal, you might still want her to air on your channel. If you can't afford the exclusive deal, then maybe you negotiate. We're going to air Oprah at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. or whatever time it is. We want to make sure that we at least get the first airing in our region. Yeah, you can syndicate her to some other station, but we want something in the contract that says no one else gets to show her before 3 p.m. So then the station that's 10 miles away, picked up in the same city or town, they might air it at 4 p.m. and probably pay a lower price to do that. A lot of them have specific rules too in these contracts where, especially if you do have a hit show where you can demand things. It's like, okay, you want to play reruns of Seinfeld. Well, so does everybody else. So if you want the ability to do that, we insist upon you doing it for sure 5 days a week and maybe twice a day. And both of those times have to be between the hours of 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. You put us on directly before or after your local news because we know a lot of people watch your local news.
But Seinfeld would not have aired on the local affiliate for, I don't know, ABC.
But when it goes into rerun syndication, it can go for whoever is willing to pay for it.
Oh, rerun syndication. Okay.
And in a lot of cases, it wouldn't be the same channel, in part because if you have a big successful show like a Seinfeld, when the reruns are fresh and it's a hot show still because the show is still actively on the air, putting out new episodes on NBC, the reruns might be extra expensive. That might be a more expensive syndication package than like Leave It to Beaver or even The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was a big hit, but it was a big hit 20 years earlier. So as a result of that, having a higher price tag, you might not want that on your NBC local broadcasting because it might be confusing for your audience on, wait, am I watching the new episode? Because, oh, I guess I don't need to see Seinfeld this week because I'm watching on my NBC station and this looks like one from 5 years ago. What's going on here? There might be just confusion that happens. On the other hand, another network that might be, let's say, a Fox affiliate might really want Seinfeld because not only does that get all the Seinfeld fans to come over and watch the station that airs Fox, and then therefore they will see the Fox advertising for The Simpsons, and therefore they might learn about other shows that they want to watch.
And stick around.
So a lot of times you won't find the show being syndicated on the broadcast station that carries the new episodes every week. These are different insider strategy approaches. There's no hard rule. Because certainly in TV times of people watching TV predominantly and streaming, if people had a network that they really liked, you might just sit on that channel all day and rarely turn over to a different channel. If you were big on NBC's Must-See TV, even if there's a show that you might like that would be on a different station, you might just sit there all day and watch all 4 sitcoms, even if a couple of them aren't right your cup of tea. And there might be something that you would have liked more somewhere else, but you just don't know that that thing exists.
Right, but that station was the closest thing you were going to get to a playlist back in the day.
So you just sit there and let it air. But then if you love this show called Seinfeld or Cheers or Friends or whatever it is, it's on NBC, and you now realize that they're replaying your favorite episodes that you haven't seen in 5 years over on the Fox affiliate, you might be flipping over to the Fox affiliate for the very first time ever.
Well, once again, you've opened my eyes because all those years growing up, I guess I just presumed that they were showing the reruns on the same station that was showing the new episodes, or at least made the show in the first place if it had ceased running.
No, I remember specifically, I remember as a very young kid.
Did you get bamboozled?
Most people don't understand these differences between syndication, network, and yada yada. So I remember as a very little kid, I spent a lot of time in Kansas City. It was local channel 8, which actually had the call sign of KSHB TV 41. I think maybe there was somewhere where it was actually on channel 41, but on my TV with the antenna.
Speaking of wonky branding.
Yeah, it was coming in on channel 8. When Fox first launched, it became the Fox affiliate. But as a little kid, before Fox, it was a completely independent station. But as a result of that, they played a lot of cartoons and they played a lot of sitcoms that I enjoyed. So that was my station that I'd probably sit on and not flip the channel that often unless if I knew specifically there was something I wanted to see. And I remember somewhere in early elementary school, I was watching shows like The Facts of Life in syndicated reruns on this independent Channel 8. And then I remember somewhere me realizing that there were new episodes somewhere on the other networks. And it was jarring because not only did I not realize there was still new episodes coming out for these shows I was watching in syndicated reruns, but there was a time jump because all these girls in The Facts of Life are now like in their college years, and I'm watching them in like early high school and early teen era reruns.
Well, wasn't that show notorious for changing cast members?
They did, but for some reason in the syndicated ones that at least that I was watching, it was the same main four that was in most of the run. It was really only the first season where they had the big cast, and they totally revamped the show. I think going into season 2. Maybe it was season 3, but I think it was actually going in season 2 where they did the hard revamp.
Yeah, I only remembered 4 cast members.
Yeah, I think it was just the first season where they had the big ensemble with Molly Ringwald being one of the little girls. I don't really even remember watching any of those shows, so that also would have thrown me off. But yeah, I remember specifically like The Facts of Life and Give Me a Break. Give Me a Break and Syndication, it was a show about a housekeeper who was basically moving in with this family. And I think there'd been a little introduction of this Joey Lawrence child actor being added to the show, but it was still mostly on this woman who comes to live with this family and be their mother figure because they lost their mother. And then when you go to the new network show, somewhere towards the end of its run, they completely retooled it, where it was the housekeeper and her best friend who had been part of the show. And Joey Lawrence and his real-life younger brother were no longer with this family. They'd moved to New York or Brooklyn or somewhere, or basically now in the big city instead of in the suburbs, and going on brand new adventures.
Oh, dang, I was hoping you were going to tell me it was the exact same show, but they now called it Mr. Belvedere.
No, yeah. But it was like, yeah, half the cast was gone. The premise was completely different. They'd introduced this new second kid, and I had no idea how you got from A to B, because all the syndicated episodes, the family was there, everything seemed hunky-dory, and then bam.
But as a child, you were headcanoning some terrible car accident that killed half the cast off screen.
I actually do want to say there was, I think maybe the father on the show. Like, the father was this old, grumbly, retired cop raising these kids and these young teenage girls that he didn't really know how to handle.
Full House type setup.
And then the housekeeper was the sassy black housekeeper who's sort of coming in and challenging everybody, but being part of the family. And this is the 80s, so this is that type of show at the time. And then, yeah, just suddenly like the family was gone. And I don't know that I ever fully found the episodes that actually explained completely what had happened.
There had been such radical changes.
I want to say maybe it was something where like the father had had a heart attack and died off camera.
Oh, God.
Yeah, something along those lines.
This is a night court situation.
Yeah, but I don't recall. It wasn't ever really a show that I really was that enthralled with. It was just a show that happened to be on the channel that I would sit on.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you, man. I don't think I've even heard of that show.
It was just 80s sitcom. Yep.
Aired right after Different Strokes and right before Silver Spoons.
Yeah, probably.
Since I don't know where else to fit in the question I almost asked an hour ago, I had heard that Friday the 13th, the series, was supposed to be called The 13th Hour right up until the last moment when they changed it.
Mm-hmm.
But what you told me earlier seems to push back against that a little bit. It sounds like they were IP mining.
My understanding is that is true. That it was going to be called 13th Hour. And this is something that painfully happens still in the film industry today. My understanding of it, and I can relate to it because I watch similar things happen in modern times. There was a show in development called The 13th Hour that was about cursed objects. And then there was this name called Friday 13th, the movie franchise. And as they're trying to come up with shows to syndicate, they're like, okay, well, Star Trek's come up with something for that. Let's come up with something for Friday the 13th. Okay, well, we got this script called The 13th Hour. That has 13 in it. This has 13 in it. Why don't we slap this name on this script, retool it to be our Friday the 13th series?
Hey, you just got chocolate in my peanut butter. You just got peanut butter in my chocolate.
That is something that still happens to this day.
Die Hard 3 situation.
Yeah.
You had this unrelated script, and then they're like, hey, why don't we just slap a fresh coat of paint on the title page?
Yeah, it's an original idea, it's an original script, and they decide, well, this original script also has a cop hero, so why don't we just make that cop hero
John McClane.
John McClane. This horror film is an original idea, but it has a game that's being played and a killer that's sort of tormenting his victims. Why don't we just make it Saw Part whatever? A lot of times there are sequel scripts or scripts that are part of a franchise that start off as original screenplays. And because we are in an era where the IP, the familiar name of the franchise, is something that they want to continue and they want to draw audiences.
I mean, compared to most indignities that screenwriters face, just bringing in a hero from another property seems like one of the least offensive.
Yeah. So you got a great original script. They look at it and they say, well, how much work is it to change this script into something that would fit into the franchises and the characters that we're familiar with versus actually writing a new sequel for that franchise that we are insisting that we have a new sequel for.
And let me hit find and let me hit replace. We are done.
In Friday 13th, the series, it's even, they put even less work into it. The retooling literally started and finished with
The title?
well, we'll just change the title page.
How do we bring Jason into this? We don't. Sold.
In a lot of cases, more modern era, taking an original horror script and just replacing the killer with the killer from the franchise that they wanted to be a part of.
It's like my original script about the killer, Freddy Krueger.
Completely original.
Come on, guys, what do you think? Just a few tweaks? I can make a couple changes. Are we veering back to syndication, or...
I mean, I think that probably, I don't know, did I leave anything out, really?
We'll end our discussion on a tangent. Perfect.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess we probably should full circle it in some way.
I don't know. That's hardly the kind of professionalism people have come to expect from us by this point, Jeremiah.
I know. I mean, I think I said it all. I don't know if you may edit something to close the gap somewhere else, or I don't know.
Yes, I will fix it in post. That's what you just said in so many words, sir. I'll just spin an ending from whole cloth that ties up your 2-hour and 15-minute lecture about syndication.
I guess just to close the loop on it, it being in syndication is a big part of its story as a show.
Well, without giving anything away, because again, I'm trying to take this episode by episode and I don't want to know too much about what's coming ahead, would you say that its move to something resembling prime time is what eventually killed it?
Yes. That is a pretty definitive yes. That doesn't really spoil anything.
A true victim of its own success.
Yeah, it wasn't that people stopped watching, wasn't it lost its fan base.
Or even its advertising.
Yeah, it was that it was being seen more and therefore getting more attention that led to more complaints.
Bummer. Might have had 6 or 7 seasons.
But on the other hand, while it performs well, at the end of the day, it wouldn't have made more advertising at 1 a.m. because that's cheap real estate for advertisers. So would it have been able to sustain its budget? That's a different story. Might it have been fallen victim to just you're not making enough revenue to justify a more expensive show than Wheel of Fortune? So we're going to just go back to producing Wheel of Fortune.
But based on what you said earlier about it airing once a week, if it had gotten up past 100 episodes, greater chance that it might have been picked up and then they would have aired reruns.
Well, I mean, they did air reruns, actually. It's not a hard and fast rule about getting to 100 episodes.
Sure.
And the big thing with 1-hour shows in particular, so sitcoms, they usually do want the 100 episodes because they want those to play Monday through Friday in rerun.
Mm-hmm.
Hour-long shows, often there's less hour blocks. So hour-long shows, they usually are aiming more to syndicate for a weekend time slot. And the reason for that is just that it's more... well, I guess I can't really explain what the reason for that is.
It only took 2.5 hours, but you painted yourself into a corner.
Well, I mean, there is a reason for it, but that's a whole diatribe I don't think we want to go into.
Oh.
But I guess, let me rephrase it then. A TV station's looking for programming for their Saturday afternoon. They need 1 rerun per week for 26 weeks.
Okay.
Whereas if they're looking for a sitcom that they want to run Monday through Friday, they need 5 episodes a week for 26 weeks.
Mm.
So that's where you're getting to over 100 episodes.
Gotcha.
So a lot of shows like A-Team and The Airwolf and Buck Rogers and Knight Rider.
Yep.
These were shows that when they were in reruns, it's possible that someone might air them Monday through Friday, but a lot of times those shows would get aired either on Saturday or Sunday, sometimes both. So if you had over 50 episodes in your syndication package in your popular show, maybe they'd want to air you both Saturday and Sunday at 4 o'clock.
Okay. I feel like I saw Knight Rider on a daily basis, but I could be wrong about that.
It's certainly possible, if you had enough episodes in particular.
Okay.
But a lot of the hour shows like that, especially things that were not your ER long-running dramas, your Law and Order long-running dramas.
Yeah.
A lot of those shows, when they would run in reruns, they'd put them on a Saturday or Sunday, so they'd just have to air it once a week.
Hey, just for completeness' sake, Conversely, would they sometimes show half-an-hour comedies back-to-back, meaning 2 episodes of MASH back-to-back?
Oh, yeah. No, especially a big popular show. Sometimes that would be part of the deal in the syndication contract. It's not my main part of business. I have seen a lot of those syndication contracts just by being around them, and they are interesting. You can either get a couple different strategies with it. One is that if you really have a hit show, they may want to air it quite a few times. So the way how you might package it is that you're going to air that show for the full hour and double up on the episodes. In order to do that, it probably has to be a pretty popular show, or it has to probably be a really low asking price. If you want reruns of Seinfeld, it's a high asking price.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those contracts might offer special deals if you do it more frequently. You're going to pay the high dollar amount to air it for a half hour a day. But if you air it for an hour a day, instead of being double, it's 175% of the asking price. Or it might be a cheap show where it's like, okay, we're the only one that's syndicating this show in this area, so we know there are people that do like it. There's plenty of episodes to where we can play it twice a day and not necessarily split the audience. And maybe we spent so much money on Seinfeld that blew a lot of our syndication budget.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we need to get something cheaper for a different time block. And as long as we're negotiating with this person for this cheaper show, instead of airing each episode twice a year, can we air each episode 4 times a year? Now you could show that show twice a day.
I just got the warning. I know my headphones are going to die here pretty soon. It switched to my phone, but I had to throw that on the charger because that was going to go too pretty soon. So
my headphones literally just died right when you said that.
Wow. Okay, stop recording.
Yeah, so let's stop.
If you like the horror genre as much as we do, you can preview the horror comic book Requiem for a Psychopath right now for free at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. Imagine a world in which horror film slashers are real. Then imagine a troubled teen bringing one out of retirement to help him take revenge on his bullies. It was written by me and drawn by friend of the show, Stephen Yu. Again, that's Requiem for a Psychopath on the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And if you dig it, please either review and rate it 5 stars on Amazon, or don't rate and review it at all. Ratings of less than 5 stars send the algorithm into murder mode for some reason. Thanks. I hope you enjoy it. So, you've got a tale from the trenches for us regarding syndication?
Oh, is that how you want to kick it off? I thought, why don't you ask me the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. How would you like me to begin?
Well, I thought you were going to cue up by asking the question about, don't they cut time for syndication?
I don't know how you think this is going to be edited in, but I'm already getting the sense it's probably not going to go that way.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What's my line?
The question you'd sent me in the first place where I said, oh, yeah, I got a story to go with that.
Don't they sometimes edit shows not for content, but specifically so that in syndication they can include more commercials?
Yeah, they do, actually. In syndication, they usually add about 2 extra minutes of commercials, which means that they're going to cut roughly about 9% of a half-hour television show, which, for the people that worked on the show, who got the show exactly where they wanted it to be when it appeared on the network, for them to even lose 2 minutes, it might not sound like a lot, but it kind of sucks. Someone has a joke that was good enough to air in the first place, good enough to air in prime time, but now it's going to be cut out, seemingly from that point on.
Well, even in Friday the 13th, the series, there were times when I'm sure the editor wanted to cut out of a scene, but knew that they needed an extra 2 seconds at the tail end for timing reasons, and therefore we linger 2 seconds too long. As per your example of lingering on Brahm a little bit too long in the last episode, to the point where he's kind of walking around just wondering, okay, camera's still rolling, what am I doing here?
Sure. No. When you're trying to fit a program to any strict timeline that a television show requires, you don't have much give on commercial television. Streaming and theatrical, obviously, you have a lot more freedom. But if your TV show runs over 30 seconds, that's a problem. You got to cut 30 seconds. And if it runs 30 seconds too short, that's a problem. You got to find 30 seconds to stick back in. I guess the difference is obviously they do the best they can to solve all those problems if it's a network show. And then 5 years later, it goes into syndication and they're like, oh yeah, you know how you got it down to the perfect 22 minutes? Well, now we actually need to get down to 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Right. Once you've solved it and it's locked in, to then try to go and take out 9%.
They didn't do that with, say, Star Trek The Next Generation, right?
Well, no, because those are first run syndication. So they're made for the syndicated market. They're already configured for syndication.
Oh, so it's not about first run or rerun.
No, it's just about the network has more expensive ad time and there's less ad revenue sharing that's happening in network primetime, for instance. You're generating enough revenue off of the 8 minutes per half hour of commercials that you have to where everybody can get kind of a fair piece that makes sense. But when it comes to syndication, those ad spaces are just less valuable, so you're getting less money for them. That money's getting divvied up differently now across new partners as well. The local station gets a bigger piece of that pie. And instead of getting the big, expensive primetime commercial ad rate, you're getting either much more affordable ad rates. You might have the same commercials, but now they're paying a lot less for them. Or you're getting local commercials, a car dealership, a mattress store, what have you. And they're not forking out the kind of money that Coca-Cola was. So to make up for that loss, you are adding in more minutes of commercials. If it's already in syndication, though, you've already calculated your show to be that format.
Understood.
But what that means is when a show gets to its 100 episodes, we did it. We're going to syndication. Oh, by the way, we need to go back and edit all 100 episodes and trim 2 minutes off of each of them. Not a huge expense, but obviously a huge amount of labor. You're not necessarily getting your top A-list editors involved in that. A lot of times you're going to outsource that. A lot of creative people, the writers, the showrunners, they may not even hardly be involved. So they might sign off, they might not. But you can kind of get there through trimming a little bit here, trimming a little bit there.
It actually almost strikes me as so little. My mind is wondering if you could simply arbitrarily pull frames every so often to the point where the audience doesn't notice and therefore shave off the equivalent without actually changing any content.
That is part of the technique. There might even be parts where you adjust the frame speed. It's just ever so slightly.
Right, to the effect it doesn't play with the motion blur or throw off the actor's movements, but it's just enough to sneak some frames out of there and shave off a little time.
Yeah. The catch is there are situations where it actually ends up being more extensive. And I actually have a funny story about that. But actually, let me give you a normal example of that. So let's say if you have a half-hour show like Seinfeld, let's say it's sweeps week and they have an hour-long special on something like a parody of the movie JFK.
Honestly, I don't think I've seen that one.
It's a pretty famous 2-part episode, but when it originally aired, it aired as an hour special.
Interesting.
So in addition to the normal 9% that you need to take out, which now you need to take out times 2, but also things like credits and opening theme and stuff like that, they only played once in that hour. So when it goes to syndication, you need to have opening theme and closing credits for both of the 2 individual episodes. So it ends up being even more than the 9%. They didn't necessarily have a super long opening theme, but you can imagine some of those classic theme songs of 80s TV.
I sure can.
Some of them were quite extensive.
Just for clarification, kids, this came from a time when the opening theme song not only gave you the entire premise of the show, but also made you want to go out and conquer life.
Yes.
The most uplifting things you have ever heard.
Some of these themes were a minute, 90 seconds just by themselves, and people would watch them every single day.
It's amazing anyone actually watched Perfect Strangers instead of leaping from their couch and running a marathon.
Right. Well, they were doing the Dance of Joy, so.
This is true.
Well, then came what we could maybe call gimmick television. And I actually have a very specific story about one of these because it's one that I worked on. Sweeps weeks and sweeps months is still a thing, but used to be a very big thing on television, where they would often try to do things that would draw more attention. Sometimes special guest stars, sometimes very shocking revelations, sometimes very big twists or changes to the show. Then eventually they started doing things like gimmick nights, where every show on tonight's network schedule, they're all connected or they're all doing something similar. And you got to tune in to find out.
Sure to swing by Taco Bell to pick up your 3D glasses.
Some of these would be like, we're going to do this episode commercial free. Do you think it's still going to be commercial free when it goes to syndication? Sometimes the gimmick might be, we're going to do this episode live. Well, when you're doing it live, you may not hit the exact timing that you need to hit for an edited show. When it gets edited for syndication, is that going to be acceptable? No, absolutely not. The one that I was involved in was the show Scrubs. And Scrubs had done a couple of episodes where the gimmick that night on the ABC network was that instead of having 4 half-hour sitcoms, they were going to do 3 of the most popular sitcoms on the night. And each of the sitcoms was going to be 40-minute episode. So we had 2 episodes that were 40 minutes. They were guest starring Michael J. Fox.
No kidding. He was on Scrubs?
Yep, it was sweeps month. But then when syndication comes rolling around, we have to figure out how to get these episodes down to a 20-minute programming block for the syndicated market. By coincidence, I'd also had a connection at the company that they were being sent to be edited. There was a company, it doesn't exist anymore. They got absorbed by a bigger group. But there was a company called Raycom Media. Their main business was that they owned a bunch of local TV stations all across the country. And the main LA office was there to negotiate deals with the studios for getting shows syndicated that then they would negotiate on behalf of all the stations that Raycom Media owned.
So you were deep in the weeds on this.
So I was deep in the weeds on both fronts because I'd worked with them in my early 20s because I'd had some meetings at that time about possibly a show that I had maybe going directly into syndication. And then fast forward a couple years later, I'm doing some work on Scrubs, and they're sending all the shows to be edited for syndication to Raycom Media because Raycom Media had Raycom Post. They edited a couple of shows that they produced themselves that were syndicated shows, but they'd also end up taking on the job to be the third-party editor for shows that are going to go into syndication market. And I'd actually worked closely with Raycom Post because when we were talking about possibly taking something into the syndication market, working with that post-production department was part of the discussion. So the Scrubs episodes are going to them, and normally it's no big deal. These editors, they know what they're doing. But then they get to these Michael J. Fox episodes that are that were originally 40 minutes long. Instead of being 9% that you have to cut out of an episode, it's almost 24, 25%, 23%, something like that you now have to cut out.
Almost a quarter of the episode.
And you are not going to be able to do that very easily. These stories are already pretty tight.
That's right. This is Scrubs we're talking about. These scripts are sealed like a submarine door.
There's a rhythm, there's a pacing, there's character beats, there's story beats.
And I never watched Scrubs, but wasn't there some continuity episode to episode, season-long arcs, changes in the characters?
Probably more than like the average sitcom up to that point, but not necessarily even as much as certain sitcoms today.
Well, fair enough, but if these are 2 episodes with Michael J. Fox, I'm presuming that the developments in one affect what happens in the next one.
These are 2 fan favorite episodes because all the bells and whistles got put into it. It's got beloved Michael J. Fox. These were quote unquote 2 very special episodes.
Does he address having Parkinson's in those episodes?
Yes.
It finally just clicked, the kind of show we're talking about. Touchy stuff to just go at with a hatchet.
Yeah, and even if it was a run-of-the-mill basic episode, cutting out almost a quarter of any episode's brutal.
Absolutely.
Obviously, that needs a lot more guidance. So part of what I actually ended up doing was going over and working with the people at Raycom Post to try to figure out on those episodes, how do we do this and have the episode still make sense, have it still land, have it still be funny, have it still be impactful.
Well, I know you still have hair on your head, so you couldn't have pulled it all out.
Right. No, but it was tough. One episode in particular, there's a whole plot line where Sarah Chalk's character, who's the main love interest female doctor for most of the show, she did something in the operating room wrong, and a patient could have died. And Dr. Cox, or the senior doctor, came in and jumped into the rescue and fixed it and then scolded her because that was sort of his methodology, was to scold all the doctors that were junior to him.
Is Dr. Cox the actor from Wall Street?
Yes.
And one of the Bobs from Office Space?
One of the Bobs. Yep.
Wonderful.
Later on in the episode, when she has to face a similar situation, and it was so ridiculous that we ended up having to cut out like the entire scene where the screw up happened. So then later, when she has all this hesitation and all this nervousness and all this anxiety about it, and it doesn't make any sense why.
Okay.
We kept going back and forth, but it was just like, it was to the point where you can't just shave seconds. You can't just shave a joke here or there. You kind of had to take out an entire scene. You had to take out an entire thread in order to get it down to where it needed to be. That was an interesting day, or interesting couple days, trying to figure out how exactly to make these two very special episodes
A little less special.
be significantly less special in syndication in order to sell more ad time.
Move more Baja Blast and Colgate.
But I do remember even at the time, the assumption was the only way 99.9% of people will ever see these episodes is going to be on commercial television.
Meaning few people were going to rush out and buy the DVD set.
It was more about movies at that time. The television box sets were happening, but you weren't sure if that was really going to take off and to what degree. So with that in mind, I remember thinking,
You would ruin this show for generations to come.
yeah, or even like as the decision was being made by the networks to do these gimmicks of, okay, this week we got to do a 40-minute episode, or any number of these gimmicks, we're going to show this thing with no commercials once as a gimmick, but then for the rest of time, chunks of it are going to be missing, and it's going to feel weird, and it's going to cut at strange times, and it's going to feel incomplete. Why are we doing it this way just to get the one version of it that's going to air once in this form? And it's not like there for artistic reasons. It's not there for like quality reasons. It's there as a gimmick. And I just felt like, in a way, you're sort of damaging your show. But, now we have streaming, and we did end up getting a lot of these things on DVD and Blu-ray and stuff like that. And in both of those formats, you can now watch these episodes with everything restored, in most cases.
Yeah, we give George Lucas so much crap for ruining our childhoods, but we don't even realize how much of the content we enjoy has been tinkered with, and a form we're seeing might not be what was intended or what originally aired.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. I mean, and it's been that way since the beginning. I mean, even shows that we would watch, Rudolph and Frosty and things like that.
The stop motion animation ones?
Yeah.
Rankin Bass.
The animated ones, too. The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, any of those. Those had been around for decades, and over the decades, the amount of commercial time had changed.
Really?
Yeah.
You're saying hypothetically, we might have even seen different versions?
Not hypothetically.
Wait a minute, how do you know which version I saw?
Well, I can say this.
This just got creepy.
Well, because now if you have the DVDs or Blu-rays, which I do, it's back restored to where they were in the 60s. So there's scenes that we never would have seen in the 80s.
Well, yeah, as I've mentioned to you before, when I was over in England and I popped on an episode of The Simpsons that I had memorized, and suddenly there are additional jokes that I hadn't seen since it first aired when I was a child. It just blew my mind.
Yeah. I guess, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but I mean, on the flip side, there are some opposite problems too. We also have situations where a lot of it's often with music rights, but sometimes it's with other intellectual property rights. Because those rights did not foresee a future that involved streaming or a future that involved specifically a technology called compact discs and DVD discs and Blu-ray discs and 4K discs, that the rights to have the music that the show used or the product placement that the movie used or what have you, because that was not negotiated into those contracts originally. The contracts back before streaming, back before DVDs existed, would have just said, okay, we're free to use this soundtrack song for the soundtrack and for the movie, and then when the movie plays on TV, we're free to use it. When WKRP is in reruns, we're free to use it. That covers everything that could possibly ever exist. That's all that we need. And then, nope, streaming now exists, and now DVDs exist, and Blu-rays exist. And technically that contract said VHS specifically. It didn't say personal video or home video or anything of that nature.
Now I'm watching Star Wars on an airplane with zero musical score.
Right. So yeah, a lot of that stuff ends up getting edited. So some of it's being saved by the technological advancements. You can now watch the full Michael J. Fox episodes of Scrubs because of that. But then on the flip side, there's episodes that had soundtracks that have to be scrubbed out because of those technological advancements.
Technology is saving the past, and then legalities are killing it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a give and take constantly.
If that was the toe you wanted to dip in, that's perfect. Because if we really want to talk about the issues that come from music rights in film and television, I think we need a whole nother episode and probably a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. Indeed.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into syndication, and be sure to return next episode, in which my guest will be Stephen Yu, my longtime comic book collaborator and the man whose artwork you've already seen if you're listening to this podcast. We'll join forces to discuss Friday the 13th the series, episode 14, Bedazzled, a trapped in a small space bottle episode that somehow manages to rack up possibly the highest body count yet, despite including an innocent kid. It's kind of stunning. Oh, and there's a cursed lantern that finds treasure and sets people on fire. Yeah, that's not even the headline. It's wild. So join us then. Thanks for listening, everyone. We know you have a lot of options when choosing a Friday the 13th the series podcast, and we sincerely thank you for choosing ours. Special thanks to Joshua Romeo for original music and to Stephen Yu for original art. And be sure to check out the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe Schlepsky discusses G.I. Joe. If you want to support our show, you can leave a review and rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you want an occasional update on our projects, you can sign up for our newsletter at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And if you want to complain about social media with us on social media, you can find links on our website. And always remember what Carl said to Frylock. It don't matter. None of this matters. Good night, everybody. Just want to point out, when I at least attempted to give you the lead-in line that you requested, you immediately shot back with a question, which then left me wondering, is Jeremiah beginning his take on this subject, or am I being directed now? Like, God damn it, man. What type of high-level Kubrickian mind games are you playing with me? This was your topic.
That's how I set you up to be the fall guy, right?
I walked right into it.
Good times.